Hi, I'm Angus Kress Gillespie, your host for Old Ways in New Jersey. I'm here today with William J. Lewis, author of a number of books about the Pine Barrens. He's written about the history and the legends of this unique South Jersey region. He's a lifetime resident of the Pine Barrens, as were multiple generations of his family before him. He shares his piney adventures on social media networks under the name Piney Tribe, and he preaches exploration without exploitation. He also teaches our children to be tomorrow's environmental stewards. After proudly serving as a U.S. Marine, Bill went on to graduate from Rider University, and he founded an environmental nonprofit to get kids outdoors. His travel mileage stretches across the globe from many locations in the United States all the way to the Horn of Africa. Bill is a remarkable writer, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to our studio today. Bill, tell us about growing up in the Pine Barrens back in the 1980s, 1990s.
So in the Pine Barrens, I usually spent my summers with my grandma and grandpa. They lived off of Junction Road in Browns Mills. I learned to swim down Marion Forge, which is pretty much a back road off Mount Misery Road right behind where they used to live. It was interesting growing up in the Pines, a lot of freedom. Nature was all around you. Really didn't look at the nature as being, or the things that we did as being something that's, very unique or anything like that. Figure it was just every day, and we grew up in the woods working through the dry flower industry. So I worked quite a bit on the side in the pines, doing different things, pine cones and stuff like that. But it was a beautiful childhood for sure, very free.
And moving along, what led you to join the Marines in 1993?
What led me to join the Marines in 1993? The only thing I ever really knew was New Jersey, particularly South Jersey, and the fact that it was hard to get work. I followed in my dad's footsteps as an iron worker. I didn't see myself as being an iron worker all my life. Not that there was anything wrong with it. It just was, it was a hard life. So I figured the Marines were a lot easier. So I actually was supposed to go in a buddy system, and my buddy wasn't able to pass the physical exam. So they signed me up. I went solo, and it definitely molded who I am today, for sure.
Yeah, I was always amused by the fact that most of the services, in their recruiting, they talk about the pay and the benefits and so forth. But the Marines just say, maybe you're good enough.
Right.
So tell us about your educational experience at Rider University.
So that was a long one. Figure 1992, I got accepted to Rider University out of high school. But college wasn't something that my folks pushed. Education really wasn't something that was, highly sought after. Higher education in my family. Dad was an iron worker. His dad couldn't read or write.
Wow.
So type of going to college was something that I would have to do on my own. Marine Corps was one of those reasons I joined the Marine Corps, was so that I could go to college. But so fast forward, 1992, I got accepted, but I never went because I couldn't afford it. It was a couple years later that I joined the Marine Corps, and I couldn't go to college during the Marine Corps while I was in because the Marines don't really put emphasis on education either. They don't give you the time for it. I got on a ship and went to Guam and Thailand and stuff like that. No time for education. Finally, I got out and finally got a job to where a federal position where I was actually able to go to night school. And I wanted to go to night school, and I wanted to get a college degree so I could show my two daughters that it was something that they should be doing. It was a roundabout way. I finally graduated from Rider University in 2014.
Okay.
So
took a while.
From 92 to 2014.
Yeah.
Not that I was a student all those years. Night school definitely is, you take a class here, take a class there, double up in the summertime and stuff like that. But I got my degree.
What impact did it have on you when you read John McPhee's book about the Pine Barrens?
I'd never heard of John McPhee growing up in the Pines. You asked me about my childhood in the Pine Barrens. It's not like we called ourselves Pineys. Hey, Piney. I never really knew the word other than Grandmom always put a bumper sticker on her old new car to her and always read, "I'm proud to be a Piney from my nose down to my hiney." but we didn't call ourselves Piney, so it wasn't something that I associated with. It wasn't until a work trip, when I work with the federal government today in Florida, that I met a gentleman from Indiana who introduced me to John McPhee.
Ah.
I was there on a work trip. I left the airport in Jacksonville, Florida, and I shot straight over to Gainesville, Florida, at a state park called Sweetwater. And there was a rare bird there, a snail kite. And when you go looking for a rare bird, especially late in the evening, you always look for the birders because they're already there watching it, right?
Ah.
So I saw two people. I walked directly towards them, kept my distance. This was like in 2018. And we were watching this snail kite up in a tree. And we all left together because one thing in Florida, you don't want to be in a park at nighttime because of the alligators. So we all left together. And the guy's like, "You're from New Jersey?" And he was really excited when I told him I was from New Jersey. And that's not what I usually get when I run into people across the United States about New Jersey. And he says, "Look, I got a hat from Wharton State Forest." But I'm like, "You're from Indiana. Why do you have a hat? Why did you go to New Jersey?" He said, "I read this book by John McPhee. You ever heard of it? It was called The Pine Barrens." I said, "No, I never heard of that. I certainly grew up in the Pine Barrens, but not sure why it was on your bucket list." And I picked up that book that weekend at a used bookstore and read it. And it was very interesting. He introduced me to the word piney being a derogatory, which I was like, that doesn't really, it sounds like he's describing when he gives this guy, a gentleman named William Wasowich, and he gives a description of him. He pulled pine cones and raked sphagnum moss. When I looked around my own family, I'm like, well, Grandpa, that's the only thing he ever did. His brother is the only thing they ever did. Dad did it. We did it as kids, all the way up to the 1990s. We must be Pineys, but are we those immoral, ancestral, backwoods people that they're talking about? That led me to write my first book, New Jersey's Lost Piney Culture. So McPhee did that because I thought, maybe ignorantly, that somebody's going to write a book about the people of the Pines. They should be from the Pines.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So it might have been a little chip on my shoulder when I wrote that book because there was a lot of funny stories. And, you know, they say pine cones and sphagnum moss, but there's 101 plants that my grandfather, my family, and other piney families harvested throughout the area year-round. So it's oversimplified.
So that was kind of the motivation for New Jersey's Lost Piney Culture.
Yes, sir.
It was kind of a reaction to McPhee's book.
Yes, I agree.
And I was very flattered you quoted me in this book.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a lot of research that went into that book. I figured 2018, the idea was, you know, planted there in Gainesville, Florida. But then 2 years later, the writing of it, and finally got it after COVID, it finally got published in 2021.
Yeah. When I started at Rutgers back in the 1970s, I did field work in the Pine Barrens, and I was kind of aware of the same thing. The people I was interviewing, I kind of felt that they were the last of the old timers because I felt that media, radio, television, it was starting to erode that isolated culture where people were still talking to one another, not just looking at their phones.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And then the next book I have in mind is South Jersey Legends and Lore. What led you to write that book?
Because of the Jersey Devil. There's so much written about the Jersey Devil. The fact that, you know, when people talk about Pineys, the most famous Piney of all is the Jersey Devil. So when you're going to write a book about folklore, there's other tall tales, legends that are just as important but not as well known. So Jersey Devil is mentioned over 13 times in South Jersey Legends and Lore, but the fact that there's other tales that really steeped in culture in the area and tradition. I mix a little bit of history in with the mixture. I mean, one of the stories in that book actually dates back to 1780 and a family story. And that story I thought was just a tall tale, and it's been proven in the basement of the state archives, where I found microfiche from August 1780, documenting this famous pine robber hideout, the only one ever discovered. And pine robbers is another great folklore in South Jersey. You know, during the American Revolution, the toy robbers would just dissipate into the pines mysteriously, just as mysteriously as the Jersey Devil, because we still don't have a photo of that guy.
And also I noticed Arcadia Books, from the history books, they encourage you to do many illustrations or photographs, but you don't have photographs of legendary. So you worked with an illustrator.
I worked with an illustrator, yeah. So that would have been, so I wrote another book, and I had an illustrator, a 16-year-old boy, my nephew, did illustrations, color illustrations, to get people outdoors, Adventure with Piney Joe. But the book, South Jersey Legends and Lore, he's graduated into college, actually was going to be a business major before he worked on that first book project with us, and then he changed his majors to graphic design. And each one of the individual stories is illustrated with a charcoal, black and white charcoal. I, myself, is something that I agree with. When you're going to do a project like this, it's a creative project. Sometimes artists are pitted against authors, and they're a different vein, but they're the same vein of the same artistic creativity. And having both on board really makes a better product for the customer.
A more broad question, how do these stories and legends reflect the culture of the region?
Whether it be Native American lore or, local Piney lore, they're all have some sort of symbol, some very symbolic for different parts of the culture. There's one in there that gives you the history of the U-Pick Blueberry Farm, which is the first one in the nation in South Jersey. And that family in itself were very proud Pineys. So Piney and being proud to be a Piney is all threaded through those 30 short stories that tackle that folklore. That's just one example. The Jersey Devil, there's a retelling told to me by my grandfather about the Jersey Devil sighting. And some of it will give you, if you really believe, or believe just a little bit, it might have a little tingle on your spine. There's a lot of naysayers. I'm one of them because I'm a historian per se, and I have to see it to believe it, kind of thing. Kind of like that one story that dates back to 1780, what we call legendary Hessian Island. Dad showed me, took me out to a place that you'd never be able to find on your own, that my grandfather showed him, and he says, "This is Hessian Island." I said, "Great, but I've read a lot of old, very expensive books about South Jersey history, and I've never heard of Hessian Island ever being mentioned." But it turned out 2 years later that I proved that story to be true. So sometimes tall tales and legends, even the Jersey Devil legend, has a little bit of truth to it. It's not always, sometimes it's more exaggerated by who's writing about it. And the story just grows more and more. Kind of like Hansel and Gretel, right? We all know the traditional Hansel and Gretel story, but it's been told in every culture, and they're not always Hansel and Gretel. They substitute the names, but the storyline's the same. That forest is scary. Kids shouldn't be roaming through the forest without their parents. Stay away. Be good children, or the witch of the woods is going to get you. That kind of thing.
And moving along, what led you to write Preserving the Pines in 2025?
Yeah, Preserving the Pines was an accident. I was looking for another story to kind of follow up South Jersey Legends and Lore, because there's a lot of quirky stories in the Pine Barrens about different things. And I approached a woman asking for a ghost tale or a tall tale that she had heard while she went and visited, because I had heard she lived at White's Boggs Village in Browns Mills, New Jersey. She said, "Well, have you ever heard of my grandfather? This guy named Dr. Vivian?" And I said, "No." She said, "You should call his stepson." And she gave me his number. And after I got done talking with the stepson of Dr. Vivian, I was really appalled by my own ignorance, that I, being a tree hugger, I've read tons of naturalist books. I consider myself to be an amateur naturalist, amateur botanist, and I had never heard of a gentleman who directors of many agencies in New Jersey point as being their mentor, and somebody that planted the seeds that ultimately preserved the Pinelands, which is what I grew up in, which is what I really adore as much as I adore my wife. I consider it to be my mistress, and yet I never heard of this gentleman. And the story of how the Pinelands came together, it's always simply said, and you can see it online today in different Facebook communities in the Pine Barrens, well, the person that saved the Pinelands was Governor Byrne, and that's it. But what about the hundreds of people, thousands of people in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, before even John McPhee wrote his book, The Pine Barrens, in 1967, all those people, all those nonprofits, groups of people, there's lists of them before they went on to preserve the pines. And that's a beautiful story that I think would echo into the future, and especially today where the environment is there's an onslaught of the natural resources that are contained on some of our parks and stuff, and how it's just a slippery slope to all of a sudden we're going to open the Pine Barrens open to development because we need it, or because there's more want than need to protect it.
Well, going back to those early days when the pioneers were trying to preserve it, what were some of the challenges that they faced?
The Pineys themselves, I would say, the public, but the Pineys themselves, and the fact that when it comes to state aid and state focus, South Jersey has always been and continues to be somewhat overlooked when it comes to funding parks and such, and the fact that South Jersey is so barren with people. The more people you have in a certain area, that generally the more there's a state focus, because there's also a lot more voters in the area, and I think, but the people themselves had to, just like a teacher in Dr. Vivian, they had to teach the importance, the value of something. There's a great theme through that book, Preserving the Pines, about who taught you the value. When you don't appreciate something or respect something until somebody actually shows you that there should be respected and that there's a value in that. And the environment itself, is often the last thing that somebody eventually comes around to saying, wow, we should really protect that. It's usually about the dollar as you're growing up. Even my own life, as growing up, raising children, I've always sought the dollar. These books that are on the table have nothing to do with money. They're nothing to do with, they're more passion. They're more, I want to teach people the value of things as well. So.
Yeah, I'm on the same wavelength. That most of my books don't make money. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So do you think the current policies today are still protecting the Pine Barrens?
Certainly. It might be a little, I was thinking about it's coming up. I was this past weekend at 2 different events in South Jersey, and one in Cranberry Festival in Chatsworth, and then another in Hamilton at the Batso Country Living Day. And again, those same locations, same spots look exactly they did when my grandfather was a kid. When his family lived on Main Street there, it looks exactly the same. It'll take me today a little bit longer to get out in the woods and leave all of society and people behind and not see another person for 10 hours. It might take me a little bit longer than it did for him back then, but today I can still find that solace in nature.
Yeah. Even me, recently I was doing an interview in Leeds Point, and I was driving back north, and I'm looking left and right. Wow, there's nothing here but the trees.
Right.
Yeah, and that's just in an automobile. I can still appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the early 20th century, we touched on this just before, the term piney was rather negative. Can you elaborate on that?
So the negative in early 20th century, but also it still exists. The myth of the piney, with quotation marks around the piney, still exists today. You picture it. I'm in front of a historical society, and I've been to dozens, given book talks with the first book. Just in 2021, a lady from the board gets up after I was introduced, and she says, well, the Pineys are like the poor white trash of the South, right?
Wow.
Ooh, or I'm at a festival, and a young man comes up with his kids, and he comes up to me and looks at my books, and he says, well, Mom and Dad always told us when we were going to the Jersey Shore, they keep our windows rolled up and our doors locked, or the Pineys would get us.
Ooh.
So the negative stereotype of the Piney's been around a long time. And I try to, in that first book, New Jersey Lost Piney Culture, who started that negative stereotype? Because, when I was looking around in my own family tree, we're not ancestral, immoral, backwoods people, maybe a little bit more remote, very similar to the people of Appalachia and the Ozark Mountains. But there's a knowledge set that my grandfather had that I never had. So that negative stereotype of the Piney, picture it. I actually have the newspaper article at home in a glass case. It's from 1913, June 28th. National headline news, because it was in the Boston Evening Transcript. The headline read, New Jersey Degenerates. Ooh. Governor Fielder, who's the governor of New Jersey running on re-election that year, he had one platform issue, the Pineys. Governor Fielder finds among the Pineys poor conditions, advocates for segregation and sterilization of the people of the Pines. People of the Pines, South Jersey, that's like 23% of the acreage of New Jersey, 1.1 million acres, 56 different municipalities within that. All of a sudden, and especially when you were down there in the 70s doing interviews with some of the pine coners, people that were doing music down in the Pines, all of a sudden you'd go all the way south and you'd hit Hamilton, you'd ask people where the Pineys were, and they'd say they're that way, farther north. And then when you start at the top, maybe Browns Mills, New Egypt area, the northern edge of the Pines, and you ask where the Pineys were, and they'd say they're farther south. All of a sudden, an entire subset population in New Jersey was disconnected from their own history and their heritage because nobody wanted to be a Piney because the Piney was enemy number one. And Governor Fielder actually won re-election that year on that one topic.
Wow.
And it's still here today. That negative stereotype still exists.
Oh, I would like to think that it became more positive at some point.
So certainly, and I'll make this comparison, and I do it when I'm speaking to people. The African American community took back the N-word. They actually used that word as a badge of honor, and it was used in a very divisive way, derogatory way, for a very long time by America, and a lot of Americans have used it, right? But the African American community is taking that word back today. The same thing could be said for Pineys. You'll see in South Jersey, there's thousands of Piney Tribe stickers out there on bumpers today.
Yeah, I think it all started at Albert Hall in Waretown, the bumper sticker production.
Well, they said also, there's always somebody looking to make money off the word Piney, too.
Yeah.
Or the word Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
So there's several different places, bars, the Greenwood Inn down in Lower Bank area, New Gretton area. Different places popped up with Piney Power stickers or proud to be a Piney from my nose down to my hiney. Yeah. But there's Piney Tribe stickers out there today, and there's people wearing shirts that say Piney Power because people are proud to be Pineys today, certainly. But also the Pines is very unique in the fact that it's a triangle. New York City, Philadelphia, and the Pine Barrens. And there's an influx both ways of people, culture, traditions, and tastes. And the fact that when people move into the area, they assume that they've become Pineys. But I like to advocate for, if you're going to be a Piney and you're going to put a sticker in your car that says you're proud to be a Piney, you need to know the dark history of the word Piney, but also the culture and traditions. You just can't assimilate that quickly.
No.
It's just like anything or anywhere in the world. There's a left coast American and a right coast American. At the end of the day, we're all Americans. But back to being a Piney, you become a type of a Piney. I agree. People that move to the area and feel like this is the area where we're going to be buried. We love this place. There's a term for it. Congress actually came out with the term with a study that they did in the 80s. It's called topophilia, love of the land.
Yes.
But Piney to me today is a positive, but there's a lot of people out there who still believe that negative stereotype of the Piney.
I learned something kind of interesting from reading your book, which is I always had argued in my teaching that Pineys were self-sufficient. That hunting, fishing, gardening, they didn't have to rely on a factory job or a desk job. But I learned about John Richardson. He found a way to make money that wasn't just survival. Tell us a little bit about John Richardson.
Yeah, so John Richardson to me he's a titan. Legendary figure, but a titan of an industry that the Pineys don't get credit for. When John McPhee wrote about Watsovich, he talked about pulling pine cones and raking sphagnum moss. Those were just two plants that were harvested by Pineys locally. There was 101 plants of the Richardson calendar, 101 different plant species out there that ultimately wound up into New York City and Philadelphia floral markets. And my own grandfather, who couldn't read or write, he worked that cyclical industry. To me, it's just another industry, one of the longest running industries that's outlasted the paper mills, the glass works, the iron forges. That industry which then employed local people, just like those other industries that ultimately became ghost towns, and those people moved on. Where did they go? They moved on to other industries that were in the area, if they stayed in the area. And dry flower industry has actually put a lot of people, hundreds of Piney families, to work. I read an article by John Cunningham, one of the state historians, that read that pine cones itself in South Jersey was $1 million industry.
And later, John Richardson's business sort of collapsed. Why was that?
Why was that? So there's a whole chapter in there, but because to me that was the dry flower industry is the ultimate. What being a tree hugger today and environmentalist is something that I would love to see our country go back to, and stop importing the same products from China and India that you can get today here, with employing local people. And it was a very sustainable industry. That industry, 101 different plants grew throughout the area, outskirts of the pines. It wasn't just in the pines, the farmers' fields and stuff like that. And the fact that it was a year-round thing, that there was always employment for people,
And shifting gears, some things the Pineys do just for fun. Tell us about raccoon hunting.
Raccoon hunting? Raccoon hunting? So that was something that John was very into, that and horse races. He loved thoroughbred horses behind a sulky. But coon hunting was, or hunting itself, hunting and trapping has been very steeped in the Piney culture for sure. And coon hunting was something that you could do almost any time of the week, at nighttime though. So it was something that you'd load up your car with specific dogs, a walker dog, different types of breeds that came from down south, very prized dogs. And those dogs could help you then tree a coon, who ultimately they would harvest the raccoon. I'm a naturalist today. I don't want to see that poor little raccoon shot, but it was something of entertainment and also very traditional thing to do in South Jersey.
Yeah. And what about the fox hunting?
And the fox hunting as well. Would they use the same type of hounds, but they were trained differently. There was just the hearing a truck go by with the hounds that are in the back of the cages, and you're on a pine road, and that's what they're going to do. That one person in the truck's going to go somewhere and just release them and just listen. Listen to the trees or listen to the birds, but they're listening to those dogs. Those dogs are talking to them, letting them know, and they can kind of follow the hunt of the fox just by what they're sounding like, what they're calling, barking.
What's your favorite part about being a writer?
Favorite part about being a writer? That's a good question. I love hearing people's reactions to, well said. I remember that. You brought my childhood growing up with my grandparents back to me. Nostalgia. As a historian, local history to me is more important. Sometimes even in the national history, because we can reach out and touch it. We can still see it. It's there. And bringing that to the readers, and preserving the past history that is being erased every day. And it's just a natural occurrence, It's just like a wildflower in bloom. That wildflower itself, the beautiful bloom comes, but it's gone. And then the plant dies down, but next year it reblooms. The thing about local history, though, is the fact that it blooms, but if we don't write it down and somebody doesn't pick up a book with that history in it, it's dead forever. And to me, it's about preserving that history and getting those reactions from the generations of past to say, I remember that, well said, that kind of thing.
So, Bill, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us here on East Brunswick Television this morning. Thanks so much.
Yep, no problem. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Pineys and hopefully get rid of that negative stereotype. Leave it in the 21st century.
Good work.